Are you making any of these super common sewing mistakes? I've been sewing for almost 30 years and I made every single one of these when I was starting out. Some of them took me years to figure out. So today I'm going to show you the 10 biggest mistakes beginners make so you can fast track your sewing skills and create garments you'll actually want to wear. Mistake number 1 is using cheap interfacing for everything. All right, I get it. Those rolls of Pellin at the fabric store are really inexpensive and they're readily available. But here's the thing. Using the wrong interfacing is often what makes handmade clothes look, well, handmade. Have you ever noticed how your necklines look way stiffer than store-bought clothes? That's probably why. The interfacing you choose can make or break your project, and it's really worth investing in quality options. I've found that lightweight, fusible knit interfacing is incredibly versatile. It provides just enough structure without making things too stiff. So I always have several yards of it on hand in my sewing room, and I'd say I use it 80 to 90% of the time in my projects. Mistake number 2 is skipping pre-washing. So I know you're excited to dive into your new project, but this step is absolutely crucial. You need to wash your fabric exactly how you plan to wash the finished garment. Let me tell you what happens when you skip this step. You spend hours making the perfect dress, you wear it once, you wash it, and suddenly it's 2 sizes too small. So there's nothing more heartbreaking than watching your hard work literally shrink before your eyes. Just be careful with fabrics like wool that are really not meant to go in the washer. So you might have seen in a recent video that I felted some beautiful red wool by throwing it in the dryer, and I had to start all over with new fabric. So sometimes you may need to hand wash or even dry clean your fabric, not just throw it in the washer. Mistake number 3 is using the wrong needle for your fabric. This is such a common issue and it can cause so many problems. So if your thread keeps breaking, your fabric is getting jammed, or you're hearing unusual sounds from your sewing machine, your needle choice might be the culprit. Think of it this way. You wouldn't use the same shoes for running and hiking, right? So similarly, different fabrics need different needle types and sizes. We actually have a free guide to needles that tells you what needle to use with what fabric, so I'll put a link to that below. Mistake number 4 is not pressing as you sew. This is absolutely crucial for professional looking results. Remember, pressing isn't the same as ironing. You want to press up and down, not side to side. When you skip pressing between steps, you end up with bubbles and folds where the seams meet, and then there's no fixing that once your garment's finished. So always, always press seams as you sew. Mistake number 5 is ignoring the grain line when cutting. So let me tell you a story about a bias cut dress I tried to make when I was just starting out. So I saw this diagonal arrow on the pattern piece and I thought it was just wasting fabric, so I ignored it completely, which was a big mistake. So cutting a pattern on the bias, which just means diagonal to the grain line, allows the fabric to stretch. So that dress made me look like a stuffed sausage and I almost quit sewing altogether when I made it. I was so upset. But I learned a valuable lesson. Pay attention to your pattern. The grain line affects how your fabric drapes, stretches, and hangs on your body. So you should always make sure the arrow on your pattern piece is aligned with the grain of your fabric. An easy way to do that is to place your pattern on the fabric, then measure from the selvage to the arrow at 2 points. This will make sure the arrow is straight and aligned with the fabric. Mistake number 6 is not trying things on as you sew. So this isn't just about checking the final fit, it's also about catching issues early when they're still really easy to fix. I still sometimes skip this step when I'm excited about finishing a project and I always regret it. So check the fit before you insert sleeves, attach facings, or start hemming, because that's when little tweaks are the easiest to make. Mistake number 7 is choosing the wrong fabric for your project. This is such a critical decision that it can really make or break your sewing success. When you're starting out, stick with stable, easy to sew fabrics. Cotton lawn, voile, and linen are all really beautiful options that won't drive you crazy while you're learning. One thing I like to do is to drape fabric over my body in front of a mirror to visualize what it's going to look like once it's sewn up. It really helps me, and I even do it when I'm at the store buying fabric. Mistake number 8 is rushing through curves. You know those puckered seams around necklines or armholes? That's often because curves need special attention. When you're sewing a curve, slow down. Slow way down. Think of it like driving. You wouldn't take a sharp turn at the same speed as driving straight, right? And don't forget clipping and notching. For inside curves, you'll need to clip into the seam allowance. But don't just make random cuts. Space them evenly about every 1/4 inch and be careful not to cut through your stitching. For outside curves, you'll want to notch out little triangles of the seam allowance. This removes bulk and it lets your curves lay smoothly. Mistake number 9 is using a straight stitch on stretch fabrics. So here's some good news. You can absolutely sew knits without a serger. But if you use a regular straight stitch, your seams will probably pop the first time you put the garment on. Think about it. If your fabric needs to stretch, but your stitches don't, something's got to give, and it's usually your seams. So use a zigzag stitch or a lightning stitch instead. Here's a tip. Test different stitch lengths and widths on a scrap of your fabric, then stretch it to see if the stitches hold. I like to start with the width of 1.5 millimeters and a length of 2.5 millimeters, and then adjust from there based on my fabric. Mistake number 10 is ignoring all those specialty presser feet. This was a game changer for me. So I used to be so intimidated by them that I just use the same foot for everything. But these feet are not just fancy extras, they're really designed to make specific tasks easier and more professional looking. For example, when I'm adding vintage-inspired details like tucks, the right presser foot makes all the difference. A rolled hem foot can give you perfectly tiny hems on delicate fabrics, while an edge joining foot is perfect for adding lace to a yoke. Take time to learn what each foot does. It's like having a whole toolkit of specialized helpers. Let's talk about one more game-changing tip I've learned over the years: using the right stabilizer for delicate projects. When you're working with lightweight or slippery fabrics, a good stabilizer can make all the difference. You can use tearaway stabilizer, wash-away stabilizer, or even spray starch depending on your project. I love using spray stabilizer on delicate fabrics. It gives you just enough control while you're sewing, but it completely washes out once you're done. And here's a pro tip. If you're working on something really fine like silk, you can even use regular starch to give it a bit more body while you work. The right stabilizer will prevent puckering, it'll make your stitches more even, and it's going to give you so much more control over your fabric. Trust me, once you start using stabilizers properly, you'll wonder how you ever sewed without them. And speaking of things I wish I knew when I started sewing, I've got another video that's going to completely change how you approach your projects. If you want to learn the game-changing secrets that took me years to discover, watch this video I made with Haley next.